Good afternoon, Gerry.
Hello, Marvin.
Could you identify yourself for us, please?
Yeah, I'll follow my instructions and give you a... My name is Gerry Bunce. My wife and I live on Cascade Avenue in Boulder, about 5 blocks from the university and about 5 blocks from Chautauqua. We moved here about 3.5 years ago from Long Island, and on Long Island we were there for 30 years. Some of my background is that I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan. I went through high school there, and then I went to college at MIT in Boston, and then after that I went to graduate school at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and that's where my wife Nan and I met. And I have a PhD in physics, and after graduate school we lived in France for 2 years, where I was a foreign researcher near Paris, and then we came back and joined a research and experiment in Illinois, and at Fermilab in Illinois, and then we were there for 4 years. And from Illinois we moved to Long Island, and we were there for about 30 years, where I worked at Brookhaven National Laboratory and did research there. And then from there we moved to Boulder.
When did you retire?
It was about 3.5 years ago. And I guess we have a...
Let's take a...
Okay, I didn't want to
take a break.
walk me.
You came to Boulder about 3.5 years ago.
That's right.
Why did you come to Boulder?
Well, Nan and I had a sabbatical year in the Alps about 25 years ago. And from that, we realized that we really wanted to live, when we retired, we really wanted to live near the mountains. And we had gotten to know Boulder because our son went to school here, both undergraduate and graduate school. And in fact, he had a bicycle accident, and it caused us to come to Boulder frequently for a while. And at that point, we thought that Boulder would be a great choice to be near the mountains. And we bought a house and selected an architect and remodeled the house before we retired. And so then about 4.5 years ago it was ready for us, and we were chomping at the bit to retire, which we did.
You pleased with your decision?
Yeah, we're very pleased. We take advantage of the mountains and the hiking and the bicycling, and we very much take advantage of CU being nearby. We take courses, audit courses at CU in geology, and I also take some courses in evolution. And we also attend a lot of the free music performances. And many talks, not just at CU, but also at LASP, at REI, etc. It's a very exciting place to be in Boulder.
What's your son's name?
Son's name is Max.
Do you have other children as well?
Yeah, our older daughter whose name's Arwen. Our daughter lives in Portland, Oregon, with her husband and our new grandchild, Demose. And he'll be turning 2 soon, and we're looking forward to seeing them at Christmas. Our son is based in Seattle, and after he got his master's degree in physics, he decided he didn't want to be stuck to a desk, and he's become a mountain guide, and he does a lot of guiding trips all over the world. And so we see them when we can. And let's see. So what would you like now, Marvin?
Well, let's come back to Boulder. Do you belong to any organizations here?
Well, I think one of the things you're always asked when you're retired is, you must have an awful lot of time on your hands and all that stuff.
Yes.
Which is, of course, true for the first few minutes. As I mentioned, we take courses when we can. We're actually not taking them this semester because we took a long trip and it didn't fit in well with taking courses. But so we take courses, and also 1 day a week I am a volunteer at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where we both loved their prehistoric journey presentation, which combines evolution and geology. And so I enjoy doing that, so I do that on Fridays.
What do you do when you're there?
Well, it's a very nice setup there. The way the museum uses volunteers, if they're interested in working with visitors, is to give them a lot of information, and then they have a variety of carts with fossils and things on them that the volunteers can roll into various places at the exhibit, and then talk with people as they come by and discuss those fossils, and also in general the other parts of the exhibit in the room and so on. And it's a great way to break into discussing a lot of things with visitors, and it's very enjoyable, and I learn a lot from the museum and also from the visitors, so it's a very nice thing.
Are you active? I know you're active in tennis.
Yeah, Marvin and I actually we met at a course in geology, on Colorado geology, I believe, and somehow Marvin mentioned that he was late because of tennis, I think, and so I asked him, and so I've joined their tennis, which they play a couple of times a week, and it's very enjoyable. There are about 8 people involved.
And where do we play?
Pardon?
Where do we play?
Yeah, we play at a private court near Marvin, which is a very nice thing to do. But there are courts, in fact, all over Boulder, which is a pretty nice perk too in Boulder.
What other things do you like about Boulder?
Well, we use the hiking trails a lot, and we also use the bike trails a lot, and it's really nice. We also like the farmers market and various other things that Boulder offers. And I guess I can't think of.
Mccoggins.
Pardon me?
Mccoggins.
Yeah, Mccoggins definitely. Mccoggins is,
What do you like about Mccoggins?
well, I think it must be the greatest hardware store in the world, but anyway, it is really a great place. They have a lot of people who apparently pay to work there. Seem to be retired people who are all, especially, they're very knowledgeable, and it's really a great thing. And of course, Mccoggins offers an incredible number of things. We've even brought some things back to Long Island from Mccoggins that we were able to find there. Yeah, so Marvin asked about my first impressions of Boulder. Actually, the first time I came to Boulder was to give a talk in the physics department. And I managed to couple that with some skiing at Vail. And I brought my son, our son, who at that time was, I believe, a freshman in high school. And so we went to Vail and we went skiing, and then I noticed to get to Boulder I could take a canyon to get between I-70 and which I think I-93 or Broadway. And so we took this canyon, and as soon as we got out of the canyon we couldn't see a thing. It was a total whiteout as soon as we got up on the plane. And that was the scariest drive I've ever had, because I couldn't stop. You couldn't know where to stop. You had to follow the headlights, the tail lights in front of you, all the way into Boulder, where when you finally got off the plateau, you could again see where you were. So that was my first impression of Boulder. Pretty scary.
I think that'd make you never want to come back.
Yeah, well, it was kind of amusing. The talk, when I knew a person I'd worked with at CU invited me, and he happened to be, I think at the time, he was the chairman of the physics department. And so when we came there, he asked us, his name's Uriel Nauenberg, and he invited us to his office, my son and I, and gave us a tour of CU. And by the end of the tour, our son was pretty impressed. I was pretty impressed too. And so Uriel made our son realize that an out-of-state applicant to CU needed a quite excellent grade average. And our son actually never forgot that. He immediately kept that in mind for his high school career. And the only school that he applied to was CU. So anyway, there was a hiccup in there, but anyway, he ended up at CU. And so that's how he's here. And then, you know, my impressions coming to see him and so on were mainly the impressions of the mountains. We often went on hikes, and the sun. It seemed that I never came to Boulder when the weather wasn't better in Boulder.
Better than?
Better than Long Island. And that actually says something, because in Long Island the weather was better than any place we had ever lived before that. So it was pretty nice, and that was also one of the points about Boulder.
Were you asked to give other lectures at CU?
I'm sorry?
Have you given other lectures at the university?
I think I gave one. Yes, I did. I gave a couple of others, yeah.
Can you tell us the subject you talked about?
Well, gee, I think the first lecture that I gave had to do with experiments we were doing in something called the spin of the proton. And the other lectures had to do with a very different experiment, which had to do with the way a particle called a muon wobbles in a magnetic field. And that wobble can tell us about the forces that we know about in our world, and whether we have any gaps, basically, in our understanding of those forces. And so I gave a couple of talks on those.
You talked about the spin of the proton. Can you enlarge on that for us?
Well, I don't think I want to go too far into that, but basically the proton is made up, if you want, of building blocks called quarks. And these quarks themselves have something called spin, which contribute to the spin of a proton. The proton and actually all particles have besides their mass, have a characteristic which is called spin, which is a little bit like they were tops spinning around. And the question we wanted to understand was how the quarks, the building blocks, contribute to this spin of the proton. And we had and still have a series of experiments at Brookhaven National Lab that explore that.
There's some CU.
Yeah, there are also CU collaborators on that.
Can you tell us who they are?
Well, I guess I would say that the leader of that collaboration from CU is Jamie Nagel. And he's actually an expert in another aspect of what the accelerator does at Brookhaven, which is called heavy ion physics, but he also is very involved in the spin program, particularly asking difficult questions.
Which is important, I assume.
I'm sorry?
Difficult questions are important in physics?
Absolutely. It's something that many people don't understand about scientists, that they actually like difficult questions. Another aspect of science that people don't understand is science is really empirical. That there is often, and one tries to have an underlying theory that one's exploring, and that theory has a set of laws, if you want, which you can follow through logic. However, logic does not drive science. Experiment drives science. If you find out your logic takes you somewhere and the experiment doesn't verify that place, then you have to throw that theory out. Mathematics is logical, but not science.
As a result of your work, have you had occasion to publish papers?
Yeah, I have quite a few published papers. Yeah.
Are they all related to your work with the accelerator?
Yes, they are, and various accelerators. I've worked at a small accelerator at Princeton for my thesis, and then I've worked at accelerator in Geneva, Switzerland, and then I worked in an accelerator in Batavia, Illinois at Fermilab, and then at two accelerators at Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island.
If you were to look ahead into the future, and that's kind of what we're doing here with this interview, and somebody's going to listen to this 50 years from now, is there anything you would say about your work with the accelerators, or as a physicist that somebody later would like you to explain more fully, so they've got a better understanding of what kind of work you did, or where this all fits into the work that's being done now, or where it's likely to go, both where you've been busy with it and where you think it might go from where you were to where it is now to where it might go in the future?
Well, I think that would be a tall order, and I don't think it would be so valuable to go into all that. But I did enjoy the chance to comment on the empiricism of science versus logic. People often make that mistake. Another point I would like to make about science in general is that there's nothing a scientist would rather do than prove another scientist wrong. And I think that's another mistake that many people make, and that is that there could be conspiracies among scientists to develop some program at a very microscopic level or smaller level that could be possible in some cases, but then you would have all the other scientists just chomping at the bit to blow holes in this conspiracy. So if you hear about any suggestions that something is the result of a conspiracy of scientists, you should recognize that that might be something that sounds sensible to somebody who isn't in science, but probably is not the case.
Does that lead you into a discussion of climate change?
It might, yes.
Why don't you give us your views on that?
Yeah, I could do that. The problem, in my opinion, with the presentation of the climate change issues is that much of the presentation focuses on the various programs that have been written to try to understand what might happen to the climate.
You were talking about climate change.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I feel that that it's really presented badly, and a lot of the criticisms that one hears with respect to these presentations, for example, you know, that this or that climate model can't be trusted, I think are valid criticisms. On the other hand, the criticisms that scientists involved in climate change issues are somehow gathered together and plotting their presentations could be very partially true, but it cannot be true that the facts that they argue are likely to be in that category, because they would be attacked and blown apart by other scientists.
Which brings you back to your comments about conspiracy among scientists.
Yeah, I really think that, you know, you can have small conspiracies, but not large ones. It just doesn't work that way. And I think also with respect to climate change, there it should be said that if one looks only at the measurements, particularly satellite measurements and measurements within ice, and one looks at measurements that are associated with geology, you can see both that the climate change is going on, and you could say that's no surprise, which is fine. There's the connection of carbon dioxide and methane with climate change, which is actually not even a question. That's simply fact. It's a known process. In fact, it was suggested in the late 1800s by a physicist. And the measurements show remarkable climate change, which can actually be pretty scary if you look at the geology of the Ice Age, the recent Ice Age, the last few million years. Climate has taken huge temperature changes within 10 to 50 years in the oscillations of glaciation and interglacial periods during the Ice Age. And this is shown by multiple types of measurements. So there's no question about it. One can tip the Earth's climate, and the Earth's climate can run out of control for a period of time until it reaches a new plateau. And those changes would be well outside of mankind's comfort zone. There's no question about it. Whether we are embarked in such a direction, I can't say that. I don't know that. But it's definitely true that measurements of carbon dioxide show that is going up significantly in the atmosphere. And the physical processes are well known. And what's not known at all is whether there could be a sudden change, and it's not even known whether we might be in the midst of a sudden change as far as that goes. But those things are basically fact. It's not fact what will happen, and it's not, and certainly the climate models, which are important things to do, are not fact either. So we should just recognize those differences.
Would you like to comment on the controversy whether the climate change is man-made or not, or contributed to by?
Yeah, sure. There are chemical, really, it's called isotopic markers, which you can look at for both for oxygen and for carbon in the CO2, and you can look at this and you can understand particularly where the carbon, for example, came from, and you can also learn about the oxygen too. And from those you can measure, and it's certainly true that there are. It's not completely straightforward to do this, but you can measure the isotopic content of the carbon and oxygen, and you can learn about its origin, and it's no question that the increase in carbon dioxide is from the fossil fuels.
Let's change subjects, Gerry,
Sure.
and
Okay.
let's talk a bit about your philosophy and how you look at life and what you might want to say to your children and grandchildren.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, when I was a working physicist, if you wish, I enjoyed that, and I felt I was doing things that would be important in the future. And by making the decision to retire, in effect, I felt that I wanted to change the way I was doing things in my life from such a kind of detailed focus on science to a much broader connection with my family, and also with the many other very interesting aspects of the world, and that's the reason that I'm very excited about what we've chosen to do. I'm, as I already mentioned, very interested in learning about evolution and also about geology, but also it does give, I think, both of us a chance to really attend lots of lectures and learn about many other things, and whether those things stay with us or we somehow pass that along. One hopes we somehow pass that along in some way, not just to our families, but also to others.
Very good. Anything else?
I think that probably covers that, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and that's the end of this tape.
You're welcome.